Powell River.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm very, very honored to be here to speak on behalf of the tremendous members of my riding, North Island Powell River, and also to be here to speak on behalf of so many women across this country, largely women who married military men after they were 60. And what is unfortunate about this is that we're having this concurrence debate on something that started in Canada in 1901. It was a piece of legislation that was put in place to make sure that young women didn't marry older military men for their pension. So it was put in place that if they were married after 60, the person that they married would not be eligible for any spousal benefits when they died. Madam Speaker, they called it the Golddigger Clause because their rationale was that you would only marry someone over 60 who had served our country because you were waiting for their pension. And so here we are, it's 2024, and this rule is still in place. And it's really shocking because it impacts so many. And what is really upsetting to me and to people who've lived through this is that in 2015, when the Liberals were put into power, the Prime Minister's letter to the Minister stated very clearly to the Minister of Veterans Affairs, we want this remedied. It's time to deal with this and make it fair. And unfortunately, even though it was written to two ministers in 2015 and 2017 and then suddenly disappeared from the mandate letters of the Minister of Veterans Affairs, it was clearly there and nothing was done. Now, I know that some members in this House will think about 2019, especially the Liberals, and they'll say, we did do something, Madam Speaker. We put into place $150 million to start to support some of these largely women that are marrying people after 60 who served our country, who served as RCMP officers. We're going to put aside $150 million for them, and we're going to find a process, and we're going to make sure that they get a little bit of a survivor's benefit. And so that was done in 2019. So again, I just want to point out, it is now 2024. It's over 5 years later. And how much of that money has been spent? How much of that money has gone to these amazing women who, in some cases, were married, Madam Speaker, 25 and 30 years, who cared for the people who served our country as they aged, and $0 has gone out to those women. $0. So what I keep hearing, and the minister and her team came to visit us in committee just over a week ago, and I asked again about this. Because, Madam Speaker, this may surprise you, but people from all over Canada contact my office and talk to me about this issue because it's impacting them. And I don't know how people feel in this House about having elderly women, in some cases in their 80s, call your office and explain to you, and I've heard this again and again, Rachel, I'm not a gold digger. I married him because I loved him, and I cared for him as he aged, and now that he's gone, I can't afford the basic necessities of life. You know, I don't want to hear that anymore. It upsets me that people who cared for the people who served our country feel like they are second-class citizens and that the mantle of gold digger is on their shoulders. And I think, Madam Speaker, you know, we had a whole study about this in Veterans Committee a couple years ago. And that's what I'm here talking about. And, you know, what was very distressing about that study was listening to couples who were in this current circumstance, some of whom didn't know. So they went out, they served their country, they found a spouse, and they were happily married, and then they found out after they were married or in a common law relationship that their spouse would not get any survivor's benefits. And so because they found this out, they went back and they asked for information, And they were told then. So one of the recommendations in the report is a very basic one, which is, can you please tell the people who serve us that if they find love after 60, they will be penalized? And then the government said, don't worry, don't worry. We have this program, and you can implement it. It's called the Optional Survivor Benefit Program. And so what they can do, Madam Speaker, is give up a percentage of their income every month to put aside for their loved one. The pickup on this program is extremely low. And I think all of us in this House instinctively know why. Because they don't have huge pensions to begin with. So what are they going to do? Commit to poverty now their whole time with their spouse so that their spouse can have a pittance when they're gone? It's shocking. So we actually had one veteran that came and spoke to me about what he had done. And he loved his spouse so much. So when he found out about the optional survivor benefit, he put it in place. He put part of his pension every month, every year, away for her. Sadly, his spouse developed a serious illness and passed away. And for years, he'd been putting money away for her. It was his money, part of his pension. He was saving it for her through this program. And when she passed, he asked what was going to happen to that money, and the government said, it's gone now. That's ours. So when you think about that, people choosing to live in poverty so that their spouse can have a pittance when they pass, and then something like this happens and you lose absolutely everything. And, you know, the department officials were assuring me that when they lost their spouse, don't worry, because they get the same pension. We're no longer deducting from it once they lose their loved one. Never mind the money that they put aside that was put there specifically for a reason just disappears into the coffers. So when we think in this place of injustice and unfairness, I think we have to really look at what's happening here and really understand that we are asking people to care for the people who served our country as they age, in some cases, some of the hardest physical, emotional, and mental times for these people. And we're asking their spouses to just go without. Never mind that people live way longer now than they used to in 1901. Never mind that in 1901, already this was a sexist, misogynistic law. Because it was. To assume the only reason people would marry a veteran was for their money is shameful, and that we're still practicing that today is shameful. And the other thing that came up again and again, and is one of the recommendations in this report that I really hope all members in this House take time with, because this is a simple injustice. But one of the things that we saw happen again and again is it was like a dance. It was like we would talk to the Ministry of Veterans Affairs, and they'd say, actually, even though it's in the mandate letter from the PM, it's not us. It's National Defense. And then you'd go to National Defense and ask them, and they say, no, it's not us, it's Veterans Affairs. You know, we have veterans, RCMP veterans, all over this country who are fighting this. They are standing up and saying, this is not right, this is not fair. We do not want our loved ones to be in poverty when we go because we can't get that pension for them, that survivor's benefit. They don't even know who to advocate to because these two departments keep switching it back and forth. And I think that's simply unfair and really, really shameful. So, Madam Speaker, you know, I keep thinking about the people who came and spoke with us. And I think, you know, one of the stories that I found most frustrating in this job is during the pandemic, we had a couple with a veteran who was 59, and him and his partner were planning to get married. And then the pandemic hit. And so what happened during the pandemic, I think all of us know. Everything sort of fell apart for a while. By the time they could figure out how to get married, he had reached the age of 60. So because of a pandemic, he couldn't get married before 60. And now his spouse will not get a survivor's pension. And I think, you know, you look at some things like that and you think this is so ridiculous. And what else has been surprising is how many veterans have contacted my office who didn't know. And we've actually had people call us and say, we got married because we were worried that if we waited until we were 60 that our spouse would get nothing. It's totally shocking. And I think of, you know, Walt and Norma. They both testified at our committee. And one of the things that will always stick with me is Walt saying to the committee, I just want Canada, the country that I serve, to understand that my wife is worth a survivor's benefit. You know, they are married, they care for their family together, they have a grandchild that has some particular needs. Walt and Norma are a big part of providing support for those needs, which is what you do when you're in a family. And what Walt is worried about is if he goes before Norma, that she won't be able to afford and maintain their house. They won't be able to have space for that granddaughter and that whole family who needs the support and care, and that everything will start to fall apart, and that's unfair. And he feels bad. You know, it's shocking to me that we're in a situation where Canada is literally making people feel guilty for finding love after 60. So, you know, Madam Speaker, I do want to do a special shout out to Madeline, who is an amazing woman who lives very close here in Ottawa. And she got a hold of me to talk about the fact that she is a survivor of a beautiful person, Roger, who served our country. And things are tough for her. I mean, Madeline, with the tremendous grace and dignity that she has, is addressing her day-to-day issues with as much dignity as she can, but she is struggling because she won't receive a survivor's benefit after Roger's passing. And so, you know, she was one of the women who called me who said, Rachel, I promise you, I'm not a gold digger. And then she said Roger was a lot of work sometimes at the end. And so it was a lot of work for her, but she would have done it again, even if it was hard, even if it was frustrating, because she loved him. And so, you know, I did the responsible thing, and I said, okay, let's ask the PBO to do a little bit of a report on this, and how much will it cost? And Madam Speaker, there's no doubt it'll be a change. But here's the thing that I think people have to understand, is the increase to the actual payments that people are making today would be minuscule. So when I look at this place, and I look at the fact that this government promised in 2019 in the budget $150 million to help out these largely women. About 97% of survivors are women. Some of these women are struggling financially every day. And since 2019, there's been money in the coffers put aside specifically to support these women that hasn't moved forward. The only thing they paid for was some research that was done during COVID, but it was legitimate research, and they were very clear, you need to make this right, help these women out. So here we are. Is there not a way for this government to figure out how to use that $150 million to get these women a little bit of money? And while they're doing that, to figure out on the other end how much that they can start getting paid into the system to make sure that in the future survivors are covered after 60. This isn't rocket science. This is really about accepting and understanding that we have specific people who are struggling in our country because we have an unfair rule that was made in 1901 and we've never, ever fixed it. It's something that this government committed to doing. They put it in 2 different letters to their Minister of Veterans Affairs, said make it right and fix it, and then it disappeared. You know, everywhere I go, I'm surprised. I remember a couple of years ago, I was in Powell River at a fundraiser, and I was talking to people, and this gentleman came up to me, and he's like, thank you for fighting on the Golddiggers Clause. I'm that person. I'm 61. I'm dating, but I feel uncomfortable that if I actually find someone I want to marry, I'm going to have to explain to them that there won't be anything for them. I think that's startling. I think about how just this summer I went to New Brunswick, and when I was there, several people contacted. They heard me. They knew that I was coming, and they met with me just to talk specifically about this issue. And, you know, I remember sitting at a restaurant when I was there, and you know, met the lovely couple. They got married. He was older than 60 when they got married. And she has a pension, and if she goes, he gets her pension, her survivor benefits. But if he goes, he can't return the favor. I just think it's really shocking. It's very concerning, and it does something that I think all of us should care about. It makes senior women poorer in this country. We know for a fact that the poorest seniors in Canada are women. And so here we see this cycle continue where we're penalizing women for their caregiving duties, not acknowledging them, not accepting the tremendous amount of support and free labor that they do, and we take away their survivor's benefit. It's shocking. It's just absolutely shocking. And I think of Elva in my riding. Her husband was a World War II veteran. She's my constituent. I appreciate her service to our country through loving her husband, and she needs that survivor's benefit. And I also want to point out that the following organizations actually are in favor of eliminating the clause: the RCMP Veterans Association, the Royal Canadian Legion, the National Association of Federal Retirees, the National Council of Veterans Association, and the Armed Forces Pensioners. These are important organizations that have all come behind and said, yes, this is something we need to make right. We need to stop punishing veterans and their loved ones for finding love later in life. Hear, hear. We have to stop it. They deserve better. They served our country. We really need to do better by them. And again, I'm just going to come back. Like, if the government were to eliminate the clause, the additional cost to the pension fund would be less than 2%, a 2% change on an annual basis. You know, I know that sometimes we really have to think about money, and I appreciate that. You know, I come from a long line of people who were struggling financially, and I come from the nonprofit sector. We did everything we could to make sure that we could spread everything as far as we could, and we really had to pinch our pennies and take care. And I appreciate that. But I think that there is a cost associated with this. And that cost is letting women who care for the people who served our country, leave them in poverty, leave them with a burden of financial insecurity. And it doesn't address that issue. And if we're a country that's about fairness, if we're a country about respecting those who served us, then we have to make sure that a survivor's benefit is there, that veterans get the care they need, and so do their loved ones. So, Madam Speaker, I know that I'm getting to the end of this, but I just want to say, in Canada, we should not be punishing veterans for finding love later in life. We shouldn't be punishing them, and we shouldn't be punishing their whole families by not providing a survivor's benefit. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate many of the comments that the members put on the record. The question I have for her is in regards to when we talk about the military. I served in the Canadian Forces, and there's a very close relationship between the military and the RCMP, even though they are completely independent of each other. ultimately even federal civil servants that are out there. And I'm wondering if she would be suggesting that we should be applying the very same principles in this situation to other federal employees.
The honourable member for North Island, Powell River.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for his question. And when we asked the PBO to actually do that work, that was the numbers that I gave you. That's not just for veterans, that's not just for RCMP veterans, that's for everybody who's excluded after 60. So it's less than 2% increase. I think it's the right thing to do, and I think there could be an approach that was implemented where the $150 million was used to get us to the place that other people would be included. So I think there could be a really targeted approach. I think it could be very thoughtful. Unfortunately, we're not seeing anybody willing to take that risk. And when we know that there's been $150 million waiting and not one survivor has received a cent, I mean, that is shocking to me, and we need to make that right, and that should be done immediately.